Have you ever felt that, no matter how hard you try to move forward, a person still occupies your mind, your emotions, and even influences your way of seeing life? Maybe it's someone with whom you shared unforgettable moments, or perhaps it's someone who, despite having had a negative impact, still holds an emotional space within you. You try to convince yourself that you need to let go, regain your peace, but a simple thought, a memory, or even an unexpected encounter reignites all that emotional storm you thought you had already overcome. If this has ever happened to you, know that you are not alone. Many people silently struggle with the pain of an emotional attachment that is hard to break. And often this attachment is not just about the person themselves, but about what they represent. The problem is that when we are emotionally stuck to someone in this way, we become hostages of our own emotions, tying our happiness to someone who, in reality, should not have so much control over what we feel. The big question is, how can we emotionally free ourselves from someone without suffering? Is there a way to overcome this connection without falling into the deep pain of emptiness or the feeling of loss? The answer is yes. And this journey begins with a deeper understanding of the nature of emotional attachment and how it truly works. Many people try to cut this bond simply by distancing themselves from the person or trying to ignore them, but soon realize that the problem persists within them. Because deep down, attachment is not in the other person, it is within us. It is sustained by our beliefs, our past experiences, and most importantly, our need for emotional fulfillment. That's why today, we will embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation together. We will understand why it is so difficult to emotionally detach from someone, what psychological mechanisms keep us trapped in this connection, and, most importantly, how we can break free from this cycle in a healthy way without sinking into pain and suffering. This is not just a video about emotional detachment. It is a guide to help you regain your emotional autonomy and learn to feel complete without depending on anyone. After all, true detachment does not mean forgetting or not caring, but rather reclaiming control over your emotions and your own life. So, if you have ever gone through this or are currently experiencing it, stay with me until the end. Let's unravel this process together and build a path that allows you to move forward without suffering, in a way that strengthens your identity, your self-esteem, and your inner peace. If emotionally detaching from someone were just a matter of time, everyone would have easily moved on from any past connection. But we know it's not that simple. The real challenge is not just in the absence of that person, but in the way our mind and emotions are programmed to maintain that connection. When we are deeply attached to someone, that person is not just a companion. They become part of our identity, our sense of security, and even our self-esteem. That's why, when we try to distance ourselves, it feels as if we are losing something essential, as if a piece of us is missing. And often this feeling is not exactly about the person, but about the role they played in our lives. This attachment becomes even stronger because our mind creates an emotional narrative that reinforces that person's presence within us. Even when we know that the relationship is no longer good for us, we are still pulled back by memories, emotions, and the hope of reliving moments that once gave us a sense of fulfillment. This process traps us in a cycle of emotional dependency, where proximity brings relief, distance causes anguish, and inevitably, we seek some form of contact, even if it's just through memories or social media. Every attempt to reconnect, no matter how small, reinforces this bond even more, making detachment an even greater challenge. But what really keeps us stuck? The answer lies in a concept widely studied in psychology: idealization. When we are emotionally dependent, we create an almost perfect version of that person in our minds. We stop seeing their flaws clearly and begin to exaggerate their qualities. Our brain convinces us that this connection was unique, that we will never find anything like it again, and this thought prevents us from moving forward. Behind this idealization, there is also a psychological mechanism called projection. Many times we attribute to the other person characteristics or qualities that we wish we had in ourselves. We seek from them the validation we cannot give ourselves, the security we feel is missing within us. And when they leave, it feels as if they take all of that with them, leaving us feeling empty and lost. But there is a liberating truth that we need to understand. Emotional attachment is not in the other person. It is within us. It is not their presence or absence that determines our peace, but rather the way we interpret this relationship and the meaning we give to it. When we begin to understand that what we seek in the other person already exists within us, we take the first step toward regaining our emotional balance. That's why, before simply trying to forget or cut off contact, it is essential to ask yourself, what does this person truly represent to me? What inside of me needs to be fulfilled so that I don't depend on this connection to feel complete? The path to emotional freedom begins the moment we stop looking for something in the other that, in reality, can only be found within ourselves. Many times we believe that suffering comes only from the absence of the person, but in reality, the real weight lies in the relationship we create within ourselves with that connection. When a bond becomes intense, it is not just a memory or a past experience. It becomes part of our emotional identity. This happens because, throughout life, we develop emotional patterns that shape the way we relate to others. Some of these patterns arise in childhood, while others result from experiences we have had over the years. If, at some point, we felt rejected, insecure, or emotionally deprived, we may unconsciously place on the other person a need to fill that void. The problem is that when we become attached in this way, we stop seeing the relationship for what it truly was and start perceiving it for what it represented to us. At this point, attachment becomes an emotional trap. When we associate our happiness, security, and even self-esteem with one single person, we create a bond of dependency. And the more we try to distance ourselves, the more our brain tries to convince us that we are losing something essential. This explains why, even after the end of a relationship, many people still feel unable to move forward. The process of emotional detachment requires a shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on what was lost, it is necessary to understand what that connection was fulfilling internally. Were you seeking security, validation, a sense of belonging? And more importantly, do you believe that you can only find this through that person? The truth is that everything we project onto another person already exists within us. We just haven't learned to recognize it yet. And this is where an essential concept comes in: reconnecting with yourself. If up until now you have given someone else the power to define your worth and happiness, it is time to reclaim that strength and direct it toward yourself. This does not mean that detachment is an easy or immediate process. On the contrary, it is a journey that requires patience, self-awareness, and above all, a willingness to rebuild your own emotional identity. But as you start to look at yourself with more compassion, invest in your personal growth, and realize that your happiness does not depend on anyone else, the weight of attachment begins to dissolve. What once seemed like an irreparable loss starts to be seen as an opportunity for growth. What was once pain transforms into learning. And what was once emotional dependency makes way for an internal freedom that you may have never experienced before. Emotionally freeing yourself from someone does not simply mean cutting off contact or stopping thoughts about the person. If it were that simple, no one would suffer after the end of a relationship or an important bond. True emotional liberation goes far beyond that. It happens when you reframe that connection within yourself so that your happiness no longer depends on it. Many people try to overcome attachment by ignoring their feelings, repressing memories, or forcing themselves to move on without actually processing what happened. But this approach only creates more resistance and pain. The key to breaking free without suffering is to do so consciously and gradually, allowing your mind and emotions to find new ways to balance without relying on the other person. The first step in this process is to look within. Instead of asking yourself, "How can I forget this person?" the right question is, "What does this person mean to me?" When you understand that attachment is not in the other person, but in what they represent inside of you, you gain clarity on the emotional triggers that keep you stuck. The second step is to deconstruct idealization. Our mind has the habit of focusing only on the positive aspects of a relationship when we miss it. We create a distorted image of the person, as if they were irreplaceable, as if no other bond could bring happiness. But this is a mental trap. Idealization keeps us stuck because it makes us believe that this connection was more special than it really was. To break this cycle, it is essential to see the situation with more realism, acknowledging both the good moments and the challenges and flaws that the relationship had. Another crucial point is to reclaim your emotional independence. Many times, without realizing it, we give another person the responsibility of making us feel valued, loved, and complete. The problem is that when this relationship ends or becomes toxic, we feel unprotected and empty. But this feeling does not come from the loss of the person itself. It comes from the belief that we need them to feel good. When you start investing more in yourself, developing your own interests, reconnecting with your essence, and valuing your own company, this attachment naturally begins to lose its power. Finally, one of the most powerful steps toward emotional liberation is learning to accept and embrace your emotions rather than fighting against them. It's not about blocking what you feel, but rather allowing those emotions to pass through you without dominating you. Every time a thought about this person arises, instead of panicking or feeling weak, try to simply observe. This memory came up, I acknowledge it, but I don't need to hold on to it. In this way, you train your mind not to react with suffering, and little by little, the emotions lose their intensity. True detachment does not happen overnight. It happens with every small choice you make to put yourself first. The beauty of this process is that when you emotionally free yourself from someone, it does not mean erasing everything you lived. It means regaining control over your own life. Now that you understand the psychological reasons behind attachment and the paths to breaking free, it's time to bring this knowledge into reality. Knowing that attachment comes from within is an important step, but true transformation happens when we put this into practice in our daily lives. The first essential change is setting boundaries, both internal and external. If you still keep in touch with this person or have the habit of following their life, whether through social media, mutual conversations, or memories you insist on reliving, this needs to be reevaluated. You don't have to act coldly or cut the person off abruptly, but you must recognize that your healing depends on creating a safe space for yourself. Every time you expose yourself to triggers that reignite attachment, you are emotionally reinforcing that bond. At the same time, it's necessary to be mindful of how you talk and think about this connection. Many people, even after a relationship ends, continue to fuel their pain because they turn that relationship into a symbol of something idealized. If you constantly revisit happy moments, romanticizing what you lived, or place yourself in the role of a victim, your mind will remain stuck in the past. To change this dynamic, start rewriting this narrative. Look at this relationship with a more neutral and realistic perspective, recognizing both the good moments and the challenges that led to its end. Another powerful tool in this process is redirecting your attention to yourself. Attachment keeps us focused on the other person, their gestures, their words, their absence. But true detachment happens when we begin to invest that same energy in ourselves. Ask yourself, what did you stop doing for yourself while you were so focused on this relationship? What parts of your life were put on hold? Now is the time to reclaim those aspects. Discovering new passions, reconnecting with old interests, taking care of your physical and emotional health, and exploring new possibilities. All of this strengthens your independence and reduces the need to seek in someone else what you can already find within yourself. The more you invest in your own life, the less space remains for an attachment that no longer serves you. And lastly, but just as importantly, cultivate patience and compassion for yourself. Detachment is not a straight path. There will be days when everything feels easy, and others when memories come back strongly. And that's okay. Don't pressure yourself to overcome everything at once, because what truly matters is not the speed of your progress, but the consistency of your choices. Every small step you take toward your emotional freedom is already a big achievement. The most important thing to remember is that this process is not about forgetting or erasing what was lived, but about freeing yourself from the weight that this relationship holds over you. It's about taking back control of your own story without depending on anyone else to feel whole. Reaching the end of an emotional attachment cycle does not mean erasing the past, nor does it mean denying what was experienced. Above all, it means recognizing that your happiness cannot depend on anyone but yourself. True detachment is not coldness or indifference. It is emotional maturity. It is the ability to move forward without carrying the weight of what no longer makes sense in your life. Many people confuse detachment with forgetting. They think that in order to move on, they must eliminate every trace of that person, rip them from their heart as if they never existed. But that's not the way. Everything we experience teaches us something, and every experience plays a role in our growth. Emotional liberation happens not when you deny your story, but when you stop carrying the suffering that comes with it. When you stop seeing this person as a fundamental piece of your happiness, you start to reclaim the most important part of your life, yourself. And that is the moment you realize that your strength has been there all along. What was missing was not the other person, but your own attention, your own love, and your own dedication to yourself. What once seemed like an irreparable loss now becomes a lesson learned. What was once pain now transforms into a new beginning. And what was once a bond of dependence now dissolves, making space for healthier, more balanced, and more authentic relationships. You don't need anyone to be complete. You already are. You don't need to find in someone else the security that already exists within you. And the sooner you realize this, the lighter your journey will become. So, if today you feel like you are still emotionally tied to someone, remember, the first step to your emotional freedom began the moment you decided to look within and ask yourself why this person still occupies so much space in your life. The rest is a process, and you are ready to walk through it. Now, move forward. Value your story, but don't stay stuck in it. You deserve much more than living in the shadow of a past that no longer exists. And if this message resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Because each of us has the right to be free, and it all begins with a choice. The choice to let go of what no longer belongs to you and make space for a new phase in your life.